I think I'm gonna like it here at Emerald Bay.
Phil fell in love with Catalina. He made the videos because he wanted to share with his children how beautiful Catalina was.
You're on TV!
And as he fancied himself a director of sorts, he would narrate, shoot, and drive the boat.
This is why they call it Emerald Bay.
And that's where I came in as a co-pilot.
You think they take cash here?
Sure.
Phil Hartman loved the outdoors because it was so different than Phil Hartman, the actor, the comedian, the voiceover guy. And he realized that as good as he was at being a celebrity, he really kind of liked being a normal guy.
I think in my old age, I've come to realize just how precious everything is, and I try to value the many blessings that have been bestowed upon me. But there's also this sense of vulnerability if fortune took a turn for the worse, and you live with the awareness that anything can happen in this world.
Phil Hartman was born in the same town that gave us the greatest hockey player of all time, Wayne Gretzky. Child that came out of this small town in Ontario, and like Wayne Gretzky, made it big in Los Angeles.
He had a huge family there before he came down to the California lifestyle.
He was one of 8 kids, and he was the middle child. And like a lot of middle children, he's looking for a way to get attention. And he found that by being funny, doing voices, doing skits, he got that attention.
Phil Hartman drank deeply of the life of Southern California in the 1960s. He did it all. He had an amazingly rich, full life, and that began in school.
He started surfing more, he started living that beach bum lifestyle.
He's the class clown, getting high, various romances when he's quite popular, and is trying to figure out sort of what to do with his life.
Phil was able to blend in with a bunch of disparate groups, whether it was the jocks, the artsy types, or the stoners.
You talk to friends of Phil Hartman's from high school, and they will tell you that he was hysterical, always trying to make people laugh.
So in school, Phil has any number of people who he's entertaining, but one of the people is Squeaky Fromme, the adherent of Charles Manson, who also attempted to assassinate Gerald Ford when he was president. Squeaky Fromme, then known as Lynn, who I believe is identified by the yearbook as having personality plus. They had no idea. She was about to affiliate herself with a personality plus, I'll tell you that much.
Decided to go to Santa Monica City College. One of my courses was a public speaking course where I met Phil Hartman. He was just so brilliant, you know, and I don't know of anyone on the planet that could instantly create like Phil could.
That's where he starts taking courses in painting and drawing, and it brings out a lot of his natural talent.
We'd go on surfing adventures, sailing to Catalina, just had some of the best times ever. My favorite trip was up to Mammoth Mountain skiing, and we wanted to go to this place called Hot Creek. It's a geothermically heated pool that's well over 100 degrees. On this one night, we went down there, and there was a ground fog of 4 feet off the ground. So when you sat down in the water, you could not see the hand in front of your face. But you could hear like 100 voices in the pool that were buried in fog. There's like over 100 people in here, you know, laughing, and then I thought, Phil, do John Wayne, Jack Benny.
Oh, Josh, now Josh gave me this house.
For 2 hours, he held 100 people in the palm of his hand who could not see him. It was just this voice in the night. And I'll never forget, at the very end, I said, that was Phil Hartman, ladies and gentlemen. He's gonna be a big star one day.
And around this time, his older brother, John, is managing a rock group called the Rockin' Foo. And he says, Phil, why don't you come and work for me? Why don't you come and be a roadie for the Rockin' Foo? And it was just sort of this bohemian existence, groupies in and out, plenty of pot, among other substances. And he really comes to dig this rock and roll surfer lifestyle.
Phil is meeting Janis Joplin. Jimi Hendrix. When Buddy Miles, the legendary drummer, has some issue with his drum kit during a set he's playing for Hendrix, who comes out and holds Buddy Miles's kick drum? Phil Hartman. That's the kind of life he was living. He's like a Forrest Gump figure. He is everywhere in the 1960s.
He's trying to figure out what to do with his life. He knows that he's funny in these small groups. He knows that people respond to his humor, but he's trying to figure out, how do I make a career, a living, out of this skill that I have and this talent that I have?
So around 1970, Phil meets this woman who lives nearby named Gretchen Lewis. They end up getting married.
She was a very pretty, slender, kind of hippie girl. Phil and Gretchen appeared not to have much in terms of monies to spend on a fancy home. So they lived in a very simple apartment, poolside.
As they went on, Phil started pulling away emotionally, and that would become his MO in years to come.
It seemed that Phil fell in love easy, but wasn't very skilled at continuing a relationship.
He was really, really into somebody, and then it would sort of dissipate. As easily as they came together, they fell apart, and they divorced in 1972.
Phil winds up joining up with his brother, who by that time is running a management company on Sunset Boulevard. And while his brother manages some of these bands, Phil begins to do graphic design for their albums.
It's also so 70s, like, hey man, you're my brother, come design album covers at my company. I mean, that doesn't happen.
And we're talking about bands like America. Their biggest hit was Horse with No Name.
You see, I've been through the desert on a horse with no name.
He designs a lot of album covers for a band called Poco. Then among their big hits was a song called Crazy Love.
Poco Legend was the album, and that was my favorite. And it was a very simple cover, white with a line drawing of a horse, sort of a less is more kind of statement.
Always in Phil, there's this throb that he could be something else.
One of the things that I realized was that I was sort of stuck in a very introverted lifestyle.
Phil can be the creative guy behind the scenes.
I was working long hours with very little social interaction. So there was a part of me that wasn't really getting to be expressed.
But Phil also feels like maybe there's a performing streak that he needs to check out. How he will apply this energy remains a mystery until 1975.
While Phil is sorting out his professional career, he's single again, which means it's time to start playing the dating game, off screen and on.
Please welcome Philip Hartman. Phil?
But like so many of his romances, this one would not end well.
Phil Hartman discovered that there was this place just starting up. It was an improv troupe called the Groundlings.
Hi, I'm Rhonda. This is my pit bull, Roy.
It's an improv comedy sketch group. They teach classes.
I thought you told me you loved me.
I did at one time before I met Tyler. Jessica.
Only twice!
For an actor to take a Groundlings class, it's a great thing because you have to work without a script.
And they would grow into this improvisational juggernaut that schooled all kinds of famous folks, including Will Ferrell and Sherry O'Terry, more SNL folks.
There's many varied careers that came out of the Groundlings, and people want to make money. Mostly you want to survive. You want to quit your job as a waiter.
In 1975, I saw the Groundlings. It was somewhat of an epiphany. I realized that I had to do this just to get some extroversion into the equation.
They'd ask for an audience member to come up, then I was backstage.
And Phil all of a sudden leaps up and begins doing impressions.
I never saw an audience member come up with that kind of excitement and energy. It was like a hurricane hit that stage, and I mean in a good way.
They thought he was so good that they invited him to join the troupe.
Seeing Phil at the Groundlings was Phil being truly Phil. You know, as time went on, you understand that his personas are his protection and are his personality.
Not unlike Jonathan Winters or Robin Williams, people around Phil who know him say that he can tend to hide behind his characters. It's hard to find the real Phil in there.
If you think about improv or stand-up, most people are just playing a bigger version of themselves. Phil was exactly the opposite of that.
I gotta keep this straight face or it won't work.
He could absolutely get lost into any character, but oftentimes there was no there with Phil.
He had a fabulous character called Chick Hazard, Private Investigator.
Worthington sailed through the air in a lofty arc over the boulevard and abruptly lodged himself in the hole of a 40-foot fiberglass donut.
Phil always had this classic sensibility to him. He was almost like this dude who came up in the 30s and the 40s. He loved old Hollywood, that sort of rat-a-tat-tat sensibility. He loved the clothes, he loved the personalities.
As he begins to pursue improv and the Groundlings, he gets better and better and starts getting more and more work.
One of Phil's co-stars at the Groundlings was a guy named Paul Rubens. He developed a character named Pee Wee Herman.
Well, good morning.
It's incredibly clever. It's enjoyable if you're 7 years old, but if you're an adult, you find another kind of humor there, right? He's winking at you the entire time, and that's what made it so effective.
Permission to come aboard, Pee-wee!
You have to know the passwords.
Phil was the first person that Paul and I brought in to be an actor in the show, and he had a character, Captain Carl.
I gotta use your latrine!
Latrine, that's the password!
And that's the moment I knew that this show was going to be a hit.
Missy Vaughn!
Yes, Captain Carl.
I knew that I wanted to be Phil's girlfriend in it. It was really just hitching my wagon to a star.
Captain Carl, I always thought, was Phil's alter ego. It was who he would rather be, so that he didn't have to deal with the hassles of the world. He could just get on his boat and sail around the world.
Please welcome Philip Hartman. Phil?
One thing we can pretty much establish is that every Los Angeles male went on the dating game at some point.
And a lot of celebrities, people who went on to become famous, when they were young, passed through that as like a rite of passage. It was a stop people made on the road to fame.
Okay, bachelor number 3. What road sign should I heed while dating you and why?
Slippery when wet.
Mostly, it was a way to get paid. And Philip was selected by the woman he was opposite, and then she stood him up for the date. And then it seems like everyone in the Groundlings went out on a first date with Phil.
Oh my God, he was kind of a rock star around the Groundlings because he was just one of those people you wanted to be with.
And then the idea that has always been noted with Phil, and that will be noted up until the last day of his life, begins to kind of take hold. Which is that there is some part of Phil that is very hard to reach. Phil Hartman is not vulnerable. Phil Hartman will not let you into that place.
So the problem is, by the time you find out that Phil might not be marriage material, you're already married to him.
I, Philip, take you, Lisa, as my lawful and wedded wife.
As my lawful and wedded wife.
I really believe in marriage. I took him at his word that our relationship is going to deepen and expand and grow and be forever. We didn't have the money to have a big wedding, so we just had a party.
Lisa and Phil's wedding was beautiful.
How do you feel, Miss Yvonne, about Captain Carl getting married to someone else?
I couldn't be happier for him. I'm very happy.
They looked adorable together, and he was crazy about Lisa. This was the one.
Decided to have our wedding videotaped in 3D.
I know that his career started to happen a little bit. He got a pilot for something, he was doing more commercials.
Do you have ice hockey by Activision?
Think you're ready for it?
I'm ready!
Fine. Cash your charge.
Phil was in the Gong Show movie.
Well, can I show it to you now?
If you were in the Groundlings, those are the sort of gigs that you got. Like Phil was in a Cheech and Chong movie.
Hey, I don't think you better light it in here, man.
What?
These gas fumes, man.
Oh, man.
And they paid the rent for a week. That was how you started to make money.
We're all gone and Phil's still in front of the camera.
What would you do?
We'd been married just a few weeks, and the relationship changed dramatically.
They shoot the bride and groom.
I was the wife, and he no longer had to pay attention. He would tell me, you need to go have your own life, you're a black hole, no one could ever fill you. My sense of Phil was that he was really two people. He was the guy who wanted to draw and write and create and come up with ideas.
I had my hair changed to pure brass.
The actor-entertainer, and then he was the recluse. On our first anniversary, we went to Santa Barbara. I dressed up in this trashy lingerie or something and got a whole outfit. And I jumped up on the bed and I stood over him and he said, "Must you? Really?" So I said, "No." Took it off, put a robe on, got my book out, and I knew that was at the end.
Doesn't seem like there are noisy fights, but he is elusive. He is beyond her reach. And then she has to walk away.
Surprisingly, Phil's not done with the institution of marriage. His next relationship is going to take him through the highs and lows of his professional and personal life. But he's also going to find that it's going to lead to his untimely end.
Okay, Jim, that's enough.
Not long after Phil and Lisa divorce, Phil meets this blonde, statuesque woman named Bryn Omdahl. And once again, as with Lisa, as with Gretchen, he's almost immediately head over heels.
When they meet, Phil is a decade older than Bryn, but neither one seems to have a problem with that.
Bryn is an invention. Bryn is actually named Vicky Jo, and she's a small town girl from Minnesota.
Vicky, she was a really fun kid. She had a lot of friends. She was very artistic, creative. She'd do a lot of drawing, and she was very good on the piano.
She was tall and blonde and good-looking and probably a very big fish in a small pond. And she came to Hollywood like a lot of people do.
She had that beautiful Nordic face. She was the archetypical, beautiful, striking woman that when she walks into a restaurant or a party, everyone turns and looks at her.
This is somebody who could be a movie star. She looks like Grace Kelly. She was flawless.
Bryn was beautiful, and she was also funny.
She had tryouts for Hee Haw to be one of the Hee Haw girls that pops out of the corn stalks or whatever.
Bryn came to LA wanting to be an actress. She went on some auditions, wasn't having a lot of success on that front, but she did date some famous Hollywood men.
And she did date Rob Reiner for a while, and she enjoyed Rob and all his friends.
I remember thinking it was funny and so Hollywoody that Phil thought her pedigree with another super famous guy was a plus. That was something that made her more valuable. He wanted that kind of person on his arm. I think for Phil, that was a sign of success.
I know she did start using cocaine, and she would tell me about parties she would go to and how fun it was and that this cocaine was a great drug, and she had a problem with cocaine. She did too much cocaine. She agreed to come to Fargo and she went through treatment.
He talked about that she'd been in rehab and had a lot of troubles, but she was great and they got along great.
That's where Bryn is at the moment they meet. She was struggling, but people liked her. She was charismatic, she was fun. And for whatever reason, they clicked. And he was extremely enthusiastic about her pretty much from the beginning.
Bryn told me that Phil kind of got his hooks in her by saying, you know, stick with me, baby, and I'll see that you get acting roles and you will have a career too.
Bryn went out to Los Angeles to become an actress. And then she met Phil, and I think she thought that there would be benefits off of that relationship for her.
He was looking for that young, pretty trophy wife. She was looking for someone that could help her out in her career. So seemingly this is kismet here.
Phil, I think, was really enamored with her and her warmth and her look. I think all those things were really attractive at first. And then I think, like with anything, especially people like that, there's a lot of baggage with it. And it seems kind of romantic at the beginning, and then it just becomes personality problems later.
As with Lisa, as with Gretchen, it becomes very intense very fast. But as the months go on, the cracks begin to show, and Phil does what he did with his last two relationships. He begins to withdraw emotionally. They begin this pattern of fighting and making up and fighting and making up that would mark their relationship from there on out.
I thought Phil was getting what he wanted, a beautiful woman, and I thought Bren was getting what she wanted, a successful guy.
So with Bryn now on his arm, Phil has found the Hollywood beauty that kind of matches his stature. But professionally, he's still looking for that one job that will define him and, in his mind, be what fame and fortune is all about.
Phil Hartman, after a long apprenticeship in improvisational comedy and sketch comedy, in 1986, finally gets to audition for Lorne Michaels and The Crowd at SNL. Now, this is a show that's a star maker. I mean, you've got everybody from Chevy Chase to Eddie Murphy to John Belushi, who began on SNL and went on to box office success in the movies. And you can see his audition on videotape.
I can also do any dialect. Go ahead, call out a dialect. I don't do that.
Phil, in fact, gets hired for the 1986-1987 season.
Phil said, when you're on SNL, you're at the center of the universe of America. Phil would say that. Right now, you get to be at the center of the universe. And that's not going to last forever.
Cut tape. Cut tape! Get that
Saturday Night Dead. In the 80s, particularly the middle 80s, Saturday Night Live was almost at its death's door. It was so bad that Madonna came on the opening episode of the 1986 season and read a statement on behalf of NBC apologizing for what had been such a crummy season the year before.
It was all a dream, a horrible, horrible dream.
The 1986 season would start a new golden era in the show's history. The cast includes John Lovitz, Dana Carvey, and of course, a 38-year-old newcomer, Phil Hartman.
That cast is still my favorite cast that was ever on Saturday Night Live.
If you were to see the DVD, Saturday Night Live, The Best of Phil Hartman, you would see this incredible range of characters that he played.
Hi, I'm Johnny Cash, and I'm a gratefully recovering alcoholic and drug addict.
Phil had a lot of great talents. He had a terrific voice, and there's almost nothing you could ask him to do that he couldn't do.
He does a fantastic Frank Sinatra.
You don't scare me. I got chunks of guys like you in my stool.
Televangelist Jim Baker.
And we need their emotional and financial support now more than ever.
Ed McMahon.
You are correct, sir. Yes!
Frozen caveman lawyer. That was his own character.
Your world frightens and confuses me.
And he even goes on to play Jesus.
Hello, my son.
Hi there. And you are?
He was extremely versatile and never a false note.
Hello, little girl. What's your name?
That sketch where you find out that Reagan, like in front of the cameras or in front of public, he was like just kind of the folksy, all like, well, you know, and he would really play it up.
And then the kids would be taken out, and he'd turn like that to be the mastermind of evil.
Back to work!
It was so funny because Phil's characters switched on the dime.
Phil loved being on SNL. He appreciated how important it was and how lucky it was that he got there against all odds. He loved it.
Julia Sweeney became known for her character, Pat, but she also was known for being frequently paired up with Phil Hartman.
I did play Phil's wife many, many times, but Jan Hooks played his wife more times than me, and I felt jealous of that because I wanted to be Phil's wife.
But in real life, the lucky woman who does become his third wife is Bryn Omdahl, who marries Phil in the fall of 1987.
Phil got married in New York. They just had a very small ceremony. No family was there, and that's what they wanted, just a small wedding, since they'd both been married before.
While Phil was at SNL, Bryn made some friends among the writers and cast members on the show, including Julia Sweeney, who was a cast member.
Bren came to SNL, maybe not every single week, but a lot. She didn't go somewhere to fade into the background. She wore bright red clothes. Her legs, she showed as much of her legs as she could.
She would come in and visit in the writer's room, and she would kind of flirt with the guys in the room and sit on their laps and, you know, play with their hair and their ears. And Phil was right there, and I thought, well, that's kind of odd. But, you know, he didn't seem bothered by it. What he would say was, how does a chubby guy like me have somebody like her on my arm? So he is very proud of her.
Work? I'm doing all the work.
In one of the home videos, we see Bryn acting. She's playing in some kind of skit, acting as a model.
It's a nice living. I get to travel all over.
Bryn would tell me that she had wanted to be an actress.
With Phil on SNL, Bryn apparently saw an opportunity to get some screen time.
It's Saturday Night Live.
When they shot the opening for Saturday Night Live and they introduced Phil, you see Phil full face at a diner and there's a blonde woman sitting across from him. That's Bryn, the back of her head. She tried to turn her head and get her face on camera, and the director said, no, just look at Phil. So that's why her earring is dancing back and forth.
Phil Hartman.
You know, it was as much as she had got onto that show.
Live from West Hollywood, it's Baby Shower, starring Brendan Hartman and Baby Boy Hartman.
At the end of Phil's second season on Saturday Night Live, he and Bryn welcome their first child.
Sean is born in 1988, and Phil loves being a father. He just takes to fatherhood right away.
Hey, Sean, look. You're on TV!
He calls me and says, I just became a father. And so I wrote a card, you know, dear Phil and Bryn, you know, much love from Aunt Lisa. You know, if you ever need a babysitter, I'm so thrilled for you. And I got back a letter that was hair curling, fury, rage, and death threat from Bryn. The gist of it was, don't ever get near me or my family or I will hurt you. I never want to hear from you. Do not be in touch with Phil. Do not be in touch with me. Never, ever, ever come near us or you will really be sorry. Yeah. And it was 2 pages. Completely and utterly shocking. So I called him and he said, you should have seen the letter she wanted to send you. He said, she's very intense. And I didn't speak to him or see him for many years after that.
By this point in his career, Phil and Bryn are bi-coastal. He has an apartment in New York for when Saturday Night Live is filming.
Hi, Daddy.
They also have a 4,000 square foot house, a mansion really, in Encino, which is part of Los Angeles.
This is the entrance to the room. This is a family room. Hi. Here's my sink. 2 mirrors, because of my split personality. And the hallway to the master bedroom. It's almost as big as our old house. And this bar area. Not much in the way of drinkers, but we love it anyway. And so pretty much, this is what our dream house is all about.
By 1989, Phil is on top of the world professionally and personally. He wins an Emmy Award as being part of the writing team for Saturday Night Live.
After Phil was at SNL for a few years, the show started adding younger cast members, including David Spade and Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, and they were much sillier, much more physical.
There's you there!
Phil was very ambitious, but he was often the person who wasn't getting the laughs. He was the straight man. You know, we called him the glue.
Chris Farley actually talks about that with Phil on CNBC.
Phil Hartman, the glue. We call Phil the glue because he holds the show together. Without the glue, there's trouble.
What changed the game for Phil Hartman at that time was the arrival of a politician named Bill Clinton.
Nice to see you.
Phil's most famous scene on SNL to this day is when he plays Bill Clinton wandering into a McDonald's with his 2 Secret Service bodyguards after a morning run.
Please, don't tell Mrs. Clinton. Jim, let me tell you something. There's going to be a whole bunch of things we don't tell Mrs. Clinton.
After that sketch, Phil was on the map at SNL like never before.
Also, he looked forward to earning money on the side as Clinton.
Are you there, Mr. President?
Hartman's Clinton is so popular that he actually is interviewed as the president by Jay Leno on The Tonight Show.
Well, you know my motto, Jay. If you got the republic, I got the banana.
Phil is riding high. He's beloved by his castmates, he's beloved by the public, the viewers. He's become a bona fide star, but things are rocky at home.
He just said, I just got to pretend to be asleep or we'll be fighting all night long. And I said, oh, Phil, I feel so bad. You know, everything seems so perfect. And he goes, yeah, but no one knows behind closed doors.
When I watched the old home videos of Bryn and Phil, it really brought home what loving parents they were.
Phil and Bryn's second child, a daughter named Bergen, is born in 1992 on a Saturday. And so, in fact, that night, the host of the show, Susan Day, announces her birth on the air.
We would like to welcome into this world Miss Bergen Hartman.
I remember him calling me when Bergen was born, and he was very, very choked up. And he said, she's the most beautiful baby in the world.
Bergen.
And she was.
You're so pretty today.
What makes me the happiest? Well, without question, it's being a father.
Simon says run in a circle. Simon says stop. Simon says hands in the air. Hands at your sides.
The video of Phil playing Simon Says with the two kids, you know, they were a fun family. They did a lot of things and they loved him very much. It showed on the videos.
Hello.
I thought Bryn was the greatest mom. She was wonderful.
Sing I love you with me, okay? I love you, you love me, we're a happy family.
By all external appearances, they look like a very, very happy couple and family, but there are cracks in the armor.
On this particular evening, Bryn Hartman showed up at 10 o'clock in a black cocktail dress, and Phil went down to meet her at the elevator bank on the 8th floor, and it's like a mile from the stage door. It's a very long corridor, and a group of us were at the stage door, and we could see what was going on. You could see Bryn and Phil obviously having an animated argument, and the proof of that was the gestures, the arm gestures. So we just turned and let them to go at it. It's lucky that there wasn't an NBC tour walking through that evening. It would have been quite a tour.
I remember one time walking into the restroom and seeing her snorting coke, and she offered me some, but I didn't think, oh, here's a person with problems. Oh my, she shouldn't be doing that. I mean, it's SNL.
She had a habit of zapping him before the dress rehearsal. One night, I could hear through the dressing room door some provocative language. I heard him say Bryn several times. You know, he's yelling at her. You know, he was obviously talking to his wife. And on at least one occasion, that was even more dramatic, he came to the makeup chair, trembling, just trembling. He was white as a sheet. And I said, Phil, what's the matter? And he said, in a comedy Phil Hartman voice, well, Noam, looks like the wife's gonna divorce me this time. And I was like, wow. And he said, well, it's my schedule. I work so much, and she doesn't have a career, and I'm away from the house a lot, and she'd like me to trim things back. But he's like, I'm the breadwinner. I'm the one who's making the money.
Phil was always working, and Bryn was resenting him more and more because of that.
She even brings it up when she calls a friend about a play date.
It's Bryn Hartman. I got your message. Phil's just been working like crazy, and he's real cranky.
Work was very important to him, and so he did what he had to do.
Hutz is the name, Mr. Simpson.
Meanwhile, of course, he has this great gig at The Simpsons, this phenomenal gig at The Simpsons.
I was just about to be showrunner in season 2, and we were looking for a sleazy lawyer to represent Bart, and we thought, oh, Phil would be a great voice to play Lionel Hutz, the lawyer.
You can ching, 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 cash in on this tragedy.
And he plays one of the great Simpsons characters of all time, Troy McClure.
Hello, this is Troy McClure.
The kind of troubled actor, pitchman.
He had the famous catchphrase, you might remember me from such films as blank and blank.
You may know me from such self-help videos as Smoke Yourself Thin and Get Confident, Stupid.
I directed Phil several times, but I was really like directed. I said action and cut, and laughed in between. He just had it.
Absolutely, Phil made the material funnier than we originally imagined, and I couldn't imagine anybody else doing it.
Bryn, my wife's Bryn.
Phil was getting a lot of attention. and she wasn't getting any attention.
We reinvented it and reinvigorated it.
I suppose some of that's natural. Maybe part of it is she just wanted to be more part of the spotlight than she was, you know.
With his profile rising, Phil appears on the Howard Stern Show on E! And what's interesting is that he brings along Bryn.
But what did you do, swimsuits, lingerie?
Did a lot of swimsuits.
Because you have a body.
She was a runway model for swimsuits.
Clearly, Phil's making an effort to raise her profile.
If he screws up this marriage, then there's something wrong with him.
Oh,
Did
no
you ever meet
kidding.
the other two wives?
No.
Were they ever
Talked to Gretchen on the phone. Never wanted to meet the second one.
were they as beautiful as Bryn? No.
As his stardom rose, he became busier and busier.
Max Jerome, Private Eye.
Phil was making big bucks doing commercials for brands like Cheetos and McDonald's.
Hello, I'm Hugh McCaddock. This just in, a meteor landed near a McDonald's. Here's eyewitness Louise Sanders.
I think they paid him $1.2 million to do that. He couldn't believe that he was making that kind of money.
When Phil starts making real money, he starts buying more toys. He buys a Bentley, he buys a Ferrari, a Mercedes. He's got a couple of boats.
And he started with a small Boston whaler and graduated to a larger Boston whaler. Then he bought a small yacht. It's called an Egg Harbor.
Eventually, he bought an airplane.
Phil had a very safe, very well-made French airplane called an Aerospatial Tobago.
57 Delta, are you straight in?
Roger, that's what I was He spent a lot of time away from the house and away from his wife with his toys.
I think I'm gonna like it here at Emerald Bay.
Maybe she felt Phil was spending too much time with his boat or airplane or not enough time with the kids, or she wanted him to go to the grocery store with him and he didn't. And I would kind of reassure her that that's normal and that he still loved her.
He wasn't home nearly as much as she thought he should be. He wasn't being a father nearly as much as she thought he would be. And so that was also a source of friction in their relationship.
By 1994, Phil decides it's time to move on after 8 seasons of Saturday Night Live. It's time to do something else.
On Phil's last show, they did a cast sign-off to the tune of So Long Farewell from The Sound of Music.
So long, farewell.
And after the end, there were just 2 characters remaining on stage, and one was Chris Farley and one was Phil. Goodbye. It was one of the memorable moments that anyone of that era would remember. In the next few years, they would both be gone.
Perhaps Chris Farley's death wouldn't shock that many people, but Phil's absolutely would.
An ABC News exclusive about the comic legend Phil Hartman. More than 20 years after Hartman's murder, his brother-in-law is breaking his silence and sharing home videos for the first time. Chris Connolly is in Los Angeles with the story. Good morning, Chris.
And good morning, George. You know, on SNL and elsewhere, on talk shows, on The Simpsons, funny man Phil Hartman could always make people laugh. Then on a day in May of 1998, that laughter transformed into shocked silence. And the question, why? 2 decades later, on a 2-hour ABC News event airing tomorrow, there are some answers at last. He made millions laugh as President Clinton on Saturday Night Live.
Jim, let me tell you something. There's gonna be a whole bunch of things we don't tell Mrs. Clinton.
And as a self-centered radio host on News Radio.
It's time for
The Real Deal with Bill McNeil.
I'm your host, Bill McNeil.
Phil Hartman was at the top of his game, starring on TV and in movies, when in 1998, at the age of 49, he was shot and killed by his wife, Bryn Hartman, who then killed herself.
After I heard Bryn had shot Phil and then heard Bryn had shot herself, I think everyone was in shock in the family. And I cannot imagine why she would do that.
And now for the first time in a new ABC News special, details of the couple's relationship from Greg Omdahl, Bryn Hartman's brother.
I would say Bryn confided in me quite a bit. I know she was upset with Phil on 1, maybe 2 occasions where he would be doing a part, The Simpsons or News Radio. He had mentioned to Bryn that, you know, maybe I can get you a part. And when he'd come home, she'd say, well, did you talk to him about, you know, getting me a part? And he'd say, oh, I forgot. And she'd be upset about that.
And an inside look at the Hartman family before tragedy struck. in home videos.
Hello. By all external appearances, they look like a very, very happy couple and family, but there are cracks in the armor.
What makes me the happiest? Well, without question, it's being a father.
The video of Phil playing Simon Says with the two kids.
Simon says, run in a circle. Simon says, stop. Simon says, hands in the air. Hands at your sides.
They loved him very much. It showed on the videos.
You love me, we're a happy family.
But the marriage was troubled, the couple fighting often over Phil's busy work schedule and Bryn's substance abuse issues, until the early morning hours of May 28th, when Bryn returned home from a night of drinking and shot her husband. Just hours later, as police arrived on the scene, Bryn would take her own life as well.
So selfish. How she could take him away from everybody. I have to stop.
I've lost a sister that was such a wonderful person, and a brother-in-law who was wonderful, and it was very hard. It was like getting punched in the gut, because I knew my sister would never murder anyone. It was such a hard thing to face.
The couple's two young children, 9 and 6 years old at the time, were home at the time of the shootings.
The children, a 9-year-old boy and 6-year-old girl, have been taken into protective custody.
They would be raised by Bryn's sister after their parents' deaths. Now, more than 20 years later, Greg Omdahl says they are thriving.
Bergen's doing great.
Bergen, this is so gigantic.
She's married now, and her and her husband have started a business that's doing real well.
Hey, Bergie, what do you want to say to yourself 10 years from now?
She's a beautiful gal and has a handsome husband, and she's living a normal, happy life. Sean's doing well. He got a degree in art, and he's pursuing his dream of being an artist and musician.
Hi.
I believe Bryn and Phil would be very proud of how Sean and Bergen have grown up and the people they've turned into.
For 2 decades, Phil's fans, friends, and family have all struggled to make sense of that early morning and what led to those tragic deaths. And you'll hear more powerful personal recollections and see more of those intimate glimpses inside their lives tomorrow night. Guys?
Thank you, Chris. That's right. Yeah, The Last Days of Phil Hartman airs tomorrow night at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, right here on ABC. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.